Tonight, you might scroll through old photos of yourself as a baby. A chubby face mid-laugh, tiny hands gripping a finger that isn't there anymore. You won't remember a single second of it. Not the laugh, not the room, not the voice behind the camera. But the real reason why is far stranger than you were too young to remember. You lived through thousands of hours as an infant. You heard your mother's heartbeat before you ever opened your eyes. Research shows you could recognize her voice within days of birth, picking it out from strangers in a crowded room. You were learning constantly. So if your brain was that active, that early, where did all of it go? This gap has a name. Scientists call it infantile amnesia, and for most of human history, nobody could explain it. Sigmund Freud was the first to give it a label, back in the early 1900s. His explanation was strange by today's standards. He believed early memories were buried on purpose, repressed, because they were tangled up with forbidden childhood desires. The mind, he argued, was protecting itself from its own past. For decades, that idea sat unchallenged, mostly because nobody had the tools to test it. Then, in the 1980s, a developmental psychologist named Carolyn Rovi Collier built something deceptively simple. She hung a mobile over a crib and tied a ribbon from it to a baby's ankle. Kick your leg. The mobile moves. Babies as young as 3 months figured this out almost immediately. Here's the strange part. Weeks later, with no ribbon attached, those same babies would start kicking the second they saw that exact mobile again. The memory hadn't vanished. It had been sitting there, waiting for the right cue to wake it up. So babies can remember. That much was now proven. Which means the real question isn't whether infants form memories. It's why none of those memories survive into the adult you became. Patricia Bauer picked up where that question led. Her research tracked toddlers who could clearly recall specific events, a trip to the zoo, a particular toy, a particular fall, but she kept testing the same children years later. And by around age 7, those early memories had quietly dissolved. Not faded slowly, like a photograph left in the sun. Erased almost completely, as though they had never been filed away to begin with. That detail matters. A memory that fades is a memory that existed and is wearing thin. A memory that's gone by 7, despite being vivid at 4, suggests something more deliberate is happening. Something architectural. This is where the story gets genuinely strange. A neuroscientist named Paul Franklin studied something called neurogenesis, the brain's habit of manufacturing brand new neurons. Most regions of your brain stop doing this almost entirely after childhood. But your hippocampus, the structure responsible for stitching experiences into long-term memory, keeps producing new neurons at an extraordinary rate during your earliest years. Franklin's research found that this flood of new cells doesn't just add capacity, it rewires existing circuits. Imagine renovating a library while it's still open, except instead of moving the shelves, the renovation crew quietly relabels every book. The information your hippocampus stored as an infant gets physically restructured by the same growth that was supposed to be helping you learn. Did you catch what that means? The very process that made your infant brain so good at absorbing the world is the same process that wiped its earliest files. But neurogenesis isn't the whole story either. There's a second piece, and it has nothing to do with neurons. It has to do with language. A cognitive psychologist named Nora Newcomb has argued that autobiographical memory, the kind where you place yourself inside a story with a beginning and an end, requires a sense of self that babies simply haven't built yet. You can't narrate "I went to the beach when I was 2" without first having a stable "I" to attach that sentence to. Infants experience the world in fragments, sensations without a narrator. The mobile kicking memory Rovi Collier found wasn't a story. It was a reflex with a long shelf life. True autobiographical memory needs language, a timeline, and a self capable of starring in it. None of that comes online until somewhere around age 3 or 4. Across cultures with wildly different parenting styles, languages, and customs, researchers keep landing on a similar number. The average age of a person's earliest memory sits around 3.5 years old. Not because nothing happened before that, because the recording equipment for personal narrative hadn't finished being built. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Even though you can't recall being held as an infant, your body might. Attachment researchers have long noted that the emotional tone of your earliest relationships, whether comfort arrived reliably when you cried, whether your needs were met with warmth or with delay, can shape your stress responses and relationship patterns decades later. You won't remember the specific moment your mother soothed you at 2 in the morning, but the pattern that moment helped build may still be running quietly in the background of every relationship you've had since. So the memories aren't gone in the way you assumed. They never existed as a story to begin with, and yet the imprint of that period still moves through you. You carry the shape of your earliest year without carrying a single scene from it. Think about what that means for how you understand yourself. The person you are today was built on a foundation you have zero conscious access to. No memory of who held you, what they said, how the world first felt against your skin. And yet none of that time was wasted. It built your nervous system's baseline. It calibrated how you respond to comfort, to distance, to unfamiliar voices. It just did all of that without leaving you a single photograph to look back on. There's something oddly humbling in that. You spend your whole life assuming your memory is the record of who you are. But the most formative chapter of your existence was written in a language you'd already forgotten how to read by the time you were old enough to try. So tonight, when you scroll through those old baby photos again, look a little closer. That child laughing at something off camera isn't a stranger you've simply lost touch with. That child is the architecture you're still standing on every single day, even with no memory of how it was built.